Why, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Innovantage Podcast, where business meets tech to bring you your competitive edge. As always, I'm your host, Max, and it is my ongoing job and duty to explore that edge between business and tech. And today's edge is one of media, one of being noticeable as a startup, one of how do you even approach the idea of being noticeable in an oversaturated market, how you promote your startup within the media landscape, and what is the landscape of the European tech scene today. And to help me explore that view is Remco Janssen, who is the founder and CEO of Silicon Canals, one of the top English speaking tech publications in Europe right now. Hello, Remco. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you come to found Silicon Canals?
Well, do you want the long story or the short story?
You know what? Let's go with the long story. I like long stories.
Well, I'm really good at long stories, but let's try to keep it short for the listener. But just to go all the way back, just after the dot-com bubble in 2000, 2001, I saw a leaflet. I was a student back then. I saw a leaflet for a job as a customer service agent at a food order website. So, and
Hmm.
imagine in 2000, that was very early on in the e-commerce stages. And I was very intrigued. I started working there and I loved it. When I quit college, basically, I started working there full time and I became responsible, well, like, happens in a startup, for basically everything. So I was responsible for customer service. I did copywriting. I was in charge of sales. So I went door to door to new restaurants and I had an amazing time. But the company got acquired by lastminute.com. They moved the Amsterdam office to Brussels
Hmm.
and I wanted to, finish my studies. So I went to journalism school. And after that, I became a sports journalist. So yeah, I'm a really big football fan, and yeah, I became a football journalist basically. So, just a question for you, Max. What is your favorite team?
Well, I don't really have a favorite team. I'm going to be honest. From very early on, I was a fan of Manchester United, but over time, you know, that's just a too popular of an answer, I guess. Too pop. So I don't know.
Well, and right now, maybe that would be not the smartest of answers. You would be ridiculed. But yeah, as a Dutch person, Manchester United, of course, was a very interesting club. We had Jaap Stam, who won the Champions League with Alex Ferguson in 98, 99. We had Robin van Persie. We have Ruud van Nistelrooy. So there's right now Matthijs de Ligt. So there's Erik ten Hag, who was a coach there. So we had a huge history with Manchester United. So for me, that's a good answer.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I visited all the big grounds in Europe. Not Manchester United, unfortunately, but I visited Arsenal, Liverpool, Inter Milan, Fenerbahce, all these great clubs. But yeah, becoming a football journalist was very stressful. Basically, you do not have a life and no weekend because everything is in the weekend. So yeah, at a certain point, I reinvented myself as a PR specialist, and especially for tech companies. Well, that sort of happened naturally because of my history in tech. And we're talking 2008, 2009. I became heavily invested in the Dutch startup ecosystem, but also in the Austrian startup ecosystem. And yeah, I loved it. So I became, really a PR expert for these, fast growing tech company startups. And in 2014, after doing this for a while, I was riding my bike on the canals and I was going from startup hub to accelerator, from one interesting company to another. And it was a beautiful day in February, sunny, not like today, it's very gray. And I was like, yeah, these are like the Silicon Canals, you know, like you have Silicon Valley in the US, like you have Silicon LA in Germany, or, Silicon Republic was already media publication back then in Ireland. And in the summer, we didn't have a lot to do. We launched a WordPress website and we just started writing a little bit, infrequently about the ecosystem in Dutch back then. And fast forward now, 11 years later, we're one of the leading European publications covering startups, but also scale-ups. And it's not just about a few guys and girls in a hoodie coding away in an attic. No, these are now really serious companies, and it's a billion-euro industry. And
True.
yeah, it's so cool that we're part of that right now.
Yeah, true, true. And especially right now is a very interesting point in time for Europe as a whole, I feel, and for European tech specifically. But before we get into the whole darkness of our today's reality, uh, I work with startups myself quite a lot. So I mentor for Plug and Play here in Vilnius. We work in Sigli with startups a lot and with scale ups as well as enterprises. And what I've seen from early stage startups, especially, is how threatened they are by the prospect of working with media as a channel, basically. We're
Hmm.
small, we don't have time, we need to focus on prototyping, we need to focus on raising, we need to focus on, solving whatever fire that we have that is currently going on in 10 places at once. And thinking about media within that context is too hard, too daunting, and too expensive at the end of the day. So we just don't do it. This is something that we will do when we have the time for it. What do you feel about that point of view?
I mean, I don't know. Of course, you're in Vilnius, and I've been to the ecosystem a lot of times. I love it there, by the way. And I've mentored for Rocket, the fintech hub, but I was also a judge at their fintech awards and a speaker at one of their conferences. So yeah, I have a little bit more insight into the ecosystem. I would say, Vilnius probably, or Lithuania as a whole, or maybe just the Baltics are in the same stage maybe as the Netherlands were 5-6 years ago, and I think that's also part of becoming more of a mature ecosystem, is realizing you have to become media savvy. But also, I think the people from Lithuania are a bit like people from the Netherlands. We're a little bit more sober, nuchter, we call that in Dutch. Not so eager to step into the limelight, or we're not like Americans, always talking and boasting how great we are. That's not part of our, let's say, cultural heritage or DNA. We're very much alike in that, and that's something that comes with the territory if you're starting a startup. So I always recommend everybody to do that from the get-go and think about your media, PR, and marketing strategy, because that's so important and really can grow your startup much faster. And you know, maybe early on you don't have to do that straight away. Go and talk to the biggest media publication, but start blogging, start a podcast like you guys did, or make sure you get invited on a podcast and talk about your expertise, what you are building, and make sure that you build that thought leadership as a founder or as founders, and that will get you a long way. Or maybe just start a community, or post on LinkedIn regularly, on Instagram. Make sure that you're heard and seen for what you're doing, what you're building. And then when you raise, for instance, you have product market fit, with your pre-seed funding, you raise your seed funding, or maybe an early Series A. That's the moment that you want to reach out to let's say the European tech media like Silicon Canals, or to your local news media. What's the biggest newspaper or news website in Lithuania?
Probably, uh, it's called in Lithuanian. I will butcher it and I will not be able to pronounce it, like Darbio Dienas, something like this.
Mm.
It's one of them is Delphi, definitely. The
Mm-hmm.
other one is basically, yeah, 15 minutes is also a big one. So yeah, it depends honestly on the community now that I think about it a little bit more. So you have like your general purpose media, you have your media geared towards I wouldn't say immigrants, but different language speaking people, because we also have our mixture of languages, very much like you have in Benelux. Not
Yeah.
as complex and as historical, but also complex and also very historical. So you have
Yeah.
stuff in Russian, you have stuff in Lithuanian, you have stuff in English, you have stuff in Estonian, Latvian, and so on and so forth. In Polish, oh my god, so much stuff in Polish. So yeah, I guess yeah, that's the
So
answer.
and especially when it gets more complex, and especially in the Netherlands, we just have Dutch. That's easiest, although we have English speaking media like Silicon Canals, but also NL Times and Dutch Review. But for instance, in Belgium, if you do PR there, and maybe it's similar in the Baltics as well, you have to have an English release, but also then translation in Dutch and in French.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, that makes it very complex. So you need to master those three languages, or at least have people on your team that can do that. But that is something you have to build into your company, your DNA. And sometimes I really recommend, there are really good PR agencies right now for early stage startup. Not just my own agency that we build on top of that startup ecosystem, and where Silicon Canals came from. But yeah, I know a few good people in the Baltics as well. Yeah, we're good friends, for instance, with Black Unicorn PR. But yeah, I mean, this is something that I think is important: is get the help and advice of people who know to do that, and can assist you on that. And secondly, you can start early with your marketing and PR strategy. Just use ChatGPT, or even better, that's my favorite, LeChat from Mistral. Use a European product, please. It takes you just maybe a couple of hours to create your marketing and PR plan, and to create your narrative and your strategies. I was doing a brainstorm, just this week. And yeah, the marketing manager, put on her fireflies. ChatGPT was on, and minutes after we did the session, we already had everything written down. In the old days, yeah, you have to just look at your recordings or your screenshots and everything, and then work it. It's so much faster these days. So I think there is no excuse for an early stage startup founder not to work on PR and marketing straight away, because now you can do it faster than ever. And yes, you have all these other things to do: fundraising, HR, product building, etc. But yeah, you just got to do it from the start and think about it straight away.
I agree with you definitely. That's one of the messages that I have supported when I mentor startups, for example. Yes, I understand the complexity, and our business is currently about 100 people, which is not a huge one, but we're past that initial scrambling phase of having to do everything by yourself and always struggling to do the next thing because everything is on fire. We're more or less settled down. We have processes, we have teams, we have people, we have expectations, and so on and so forth. And I kind of understand the difference in, well, when you're just starting out and you look at those companies and you feel like, okay, that's so much, that's so many resources that I can leverage and use, and just hundreds of thousands of euros that I can invest into specific channels only. And while that is true, partially, you do lose a lot of flexibility in what you can do. You gain new problems. For example, how do you maintain the same voice across different channels if you have different people maintaining those channels? And you always will have different fires that you need to put out. And if you're a startup, at those kind of pre-seed seed stages, when you're looking for series A after that, for example, you still are in that mindset of, okay, we need the next stage, we need the next founding round in order to survive. And you're probably going to be balancing and managing that throughout. So if you start early, like you say, when you start building that muscle, basically, the better the outcome becomes. So I definitely agree with you here. It's hard to do, but yeah.
No, but it's hard to do, but it is necessary, and especially in the early stage. And for two reasons: you mentioned fundraising, but also if you look at sales and marketing. If you're an early stage company and you're trying to get to product market fit, and you're sort of achieving this. So what you do at first is you will talk to your, and let's say if you're a B2B company, your inner circle, basically. You will reach out to the contacts you already have, the easy reachable people. But if you're sort of really getting to product market fit, then the valley of death comes. And what happens is then, yeah, you need to reach outside of your circle, people you do not know. You start cold calling, or inside sales on LinkedIn to people you do not know. And let's say, you reach out to people and then they research you on the internet. Or even better, they, they start doing that with AI bots nowadays. And they see absolutely nothing or very little about your company and even less about your expertise. What do you think the likelihood would be that you will get a call or a meeting or a video call or even just getting to the demo phase if you want to talk to somebody? I think that's really low. And the more there is to be found about your company, and even just especially early stage, maybe you've been on a podcast or you've been covered by a tech media publication like Silicon Canals, who does cover early stage startups, especially when they're bootstrapped nowadays. By the way, we want to hear more from the bootstrap companies who've done 1 million ARR plus.
That's a
It,
rarity, I feel, but yeah.
well, I mean, in AI, we'll probably get there later. It's becoming less of a rarity. And I think it's important to really start early on, because yeah, you cannot reach that critical point of beyond the product market fit and reaching critical mass if there's no notoriety, if there's no clear expertise from your company externally. And same goes for fundraising. You think who has it easier fundraising? The company who has been in the media, who's been talked about, who has done some marketing, or the company who's just, yeah, no, we're being in stealth mode. We were just, we're building. It's, unless you're building something great, of course, but it's really important to realize that you need to be out there and that you need to be seen in order to grow your company.
Yeah, yeah, definitely so, definitely so. Like sales and marketing, the value of social proofing generally cannot be overstated, and visibility in the media is one of the best ways to do that. Of
Mm.
course, there's also the downside to that. If everything in the media about you says that, okay, this is that failing startup that is constantly failing and is failing at everything that they do, then that kind of has its negative connotation. But that's business. You need to take some risks, and ideally, you would succeed. I hope.
Yeah, I don't see that a lot happening in Europe because yeah, it's not that closely followed. But yeah, of course, there's always risks involved. But I don't believe, and this is an old trope maybe, that there's no such thing as negative PR, and usually there isn't, because yeah, people get curious for a product and start researching it and start trying it. So yeah, I wouldn't be too scared of negative PR unless you're really doing something wrong, either criminal or fraudulent, or yeah, just basically straight up really lying about your product or the capabilities. But other than that, I think yeah, there's not really something like negative PR, but you know,
Yeah,
everyone has a different experience with that.
that's
It's
true.
definitely
That's true.
stressful.
I feel like, that's like a pyramid where you have great PR with good messages at the top, then you have great PR with so messages somewhere in the middle, then you have lower down, like some sort of PR, blah, 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 and then down you have nothing. So, at
Yeah,
least one level up, and then you'll go one level up and one level up. And, failure is a natural part of business. Like, you try things, some work out, some do not. And what I found out about, running a business myself is basically if you're honest and transparent as to what went down, what are you trying to do, and what worked, what didn't work, then, it does not impact you negatively. It only adds to your experience. Of course, like you said, if you're doing something fraudulent, if you're doing something criminal, then that does not apply. But other than that, I again agree with you that, some PR is better than no PR. And you shouldn't be afraid of bad PR because, that's always a risk somewhere. And if you have more good messages than bad messages, then again, you have more flexibility into how you approach your strategy, basically.
yeah. And you have the founder of Rodeo Software in the Netherlands who raised a lot of money from really big private equity and VC firms, and it turns out that yeah, they hadn't done their due diligence well enough, and what happened was that basically none of his sales were figures were correct. So he overvalued the company, and yeah, he basically just left and ran away, leaving even his partner behind. and yeah, he just disappeared off the face of the earth, probably with a lot of money. Yeah,
Yeah.
these things happen as well. So, but of course, they're still a rarity. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's also part of the process of the European startup ecosystem, that VCs need to do their due diligence correctly. Look at the bank accounts, look at, are these actual customers? Are they actually the customer for the value that they say in the books? Or are we just being, is this just a big smoke screen? And is this a White Lotus situation where, yeah, somebody is basically just a fraud?
Yeah. 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 And we all know the cautionary tales of your like Theranoses or, FTXs or I don't know,
Yeah, and I
Nikola
think I think
trucks or whatever.
yeah, and I think Rodeo Software is one that really sticks, because that's a Dutch example, and we always think, it happens across the pond, and in maybe the U.S. or in some, you know let's say, tax havens or something like that. No, it's definitely something that can happen here as well. So everybody needs to be aware of that.
Yeah, yeah. And again, that's where the value of good PR comes in, because the bad guys, in quotes, they will invest into PR a lot and they will try to overwhelm with good messages. And if you're an unknown, then their negative reputation can impact your negative reputation because you have none. So everybody kind of looks at you the same, like, oh, you're very similar to those guys. Those guys were not very good. So I don't know what I should think about you. So yeah, that's definitely something that startups should invest in very, very early. Besides that time frame of investing early, what do you see are some other common misconceptions or mistakes that startups founders make when approaching media or visibility generally?
Well, this is one of my pet peeves, and something that annoys the crap out of me, is that the startup founders have the tendency to be, and I want to say this nicely, but there's no nice way to put it, but they can act a little entitled. So, and this comes a little bit with the turf of being an entrepreneur. There is, well, sometimes I ride narcissism, but sometimes, yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of inflated ego there as well. I mean, you're building something great. Everybody tells you you're amazing. You have a stellar product. You have funding. People are, great. VCs are pouring millions in you. You're on top of the world, it feels like. And then you're reaching out to media, and you want them to write positively about you. And you see them as a marketing channel. But we as media, we are independent, and we want to be as objective as possible. And I think that is a realization that not all founders have. And we are, and especially if you're doing what we call earned publicity. So when you reach out to a media channel with PR, with a press release about your company, yeah, we can do research, or we can, mention your competitor, or we can say, hey, look, this is a company in the past that has done this and went bankrupt. So, as much as you want to control the narrative, we as journalists need to be objective, and we write our own story. And you do not control what we write. You do not own us. Well, you can, but then, yeah, that is called content marketing, or native content. You can, of course, work with us and have a publication, and we write it for you, but that's something that's paid, and that's something that's different from the editorial part. And yeah, I have had a few nasty incidents. Actually, 2 weeks ago, a founder from who came from a very well-known incubator called me an arsehole. I'm sorry for the coarse language, but yeah, I mean, there was a story and there was an image of his, yeah, a photo that they provided to us, and yeah, we as media, we do not take down stuff just because. And he thought that because of the privacy regulation, GDPR, he was entitled to have his picture taken down. But we're a media company. We do not, the first rule for us is not GDPR, but is media regulations. And they specifically say that, yeah, we have freedom of speech and freedom of information. So that, transcends the GDPR. So we told them, look, yeah, we cannot take it down. This picture was provided to us, and there's no legal reasons to do it. And if you have a complaint, you can go to the um, to the journalism council and file a formal complaint. And then he called me a certain name. Yeah, and I don't take that lightly because nowadays, especially in the way the world is right now, media is under a lot of pressure already, and media freedom is under a lot of pressure. And journalists getting killed, journalists getting bullied, journalists getting imprisoned, we're getting bombed, or just threatened on the street because people don't like a camera in their face. And I don't take lightly to that. And I feel, and I'm going to use very strong language. I think it's a form of terrorism if
Mhm.
somebody acts like that to journalists. So be very careful how you portray yourself. Of course, we can have strong discussions, but yeah, if somebody calls me names or starts threatening my team, yeah, that's really a no go. And unfortunately, it happens once or twice a year.
Oh, wow, really? So often? That's
Yeah,
insane.
no. But yeah, I think the key takeaway here is that yeah, you do not own us. And it's also not a courtesy. We cover it because we think it is interesting to the general public. And I'm still from the old days of journalism that journalists are a watchdog for democracy. And maybe you think, oh yeah, companies are not that interesting for democracy. No, right now, European tech companies are the backbone of our freedom and democracy. And I will tell you why. Because we need to have less dependence on non-European tech. And I'm not just talking about China, I'm also talking about the US because yeah, US at the moment is heading for, there's no other word for it, dictatorship and tyranny. And yeah, we cannot longer rely on the US to be our friend as we've always done. Unfortunately, so, because I would like it to be any other way, and hopefully it will change soon, but the damage done will take at least, half a generation to be undone. And also, we have outsourced everything, but we have to bring everything back from just chip manufacturing, drones, weapons technology, defense tech, but also just, cloud services. Everything that we're using here, and not just because we want to have it for ourselves, but also because all the data that is being used by all these companies, yeah, they will go to other territories that, yeah, unfortunately, yeah, are no longer our friends or not acting as our friends. And one thing that Europe stands out is I was just talking about that GDPR doesn't apply to media, but I think GDPR is very important and is very strong. And Brussels just fined Apple and Meta again, and I don't think that's just a flimsy. And they just doing that, oh yeah, because they don't like them. No, because they are really violating our laws constantly, consistently. And these are our democratic rights. And that's why we need to build companies in Europe that, you know, are built with these democratic values in mind and who love to be regulated. It's great to be regulated because that says, hey, yeah, of course we need to move fast and break things, and you have to draw the line and maybe move it a little bit forward as we move along. But what is happening with all of our data? Is it just somewhere out there and there's no control about it anymore? Well, yeah, maybe a little bit. So yeah, European tech is the backbone of European democracy. Also because it creates jobs, it creates wealth, it creates freedom.
That's um, that's a very big point of contention for many, I would say, today.
Why?
Personally, I have said on this show and off this show many times that I am generally an optimist when it comes to tech. I do believe that tech can serve a good for the public wealth and health, generally speaking, and it's not about only stripping jobs and optimizing things until nothing of value remains. And I've always viewed regulation as a framework, basically, of how should we do stuff, how should we apply to specific technologies, and how should we use specific technologies, and what is What are their limitations and what are their best use cases? But on the other side of the spectrum of this argument is, of course, that any regulation that just basically thrives innovation, where, with all of the downsides of the US, all of the biggest companies that have grown, they have grown out of the US, where you have less regulation, where you have less protection laws in terms of data, in terms of workforce, in terms of personal, I don't know, boundaries and everything else. And we do live in a largely capitalist society where at the end of the day, if you make money, you win. And if you do not make money, you do not. So, what do you say to that point of view? Does it hold merits?
Yeah, I don't feel that we're first in a capitalist society. We're first in a democratic society. And a good democratic society takes care of its citizens. And every citizen is equal, and there should be equity. A capitalist society, in essence, is not.
Mm,
And a capitalist society only looks at winners and losers. And although we are in a capitalist system, I believe that the reason why Europe is so great and awesome to live is because the majority of companies have, laws where they will protect their citizens. And democracy is about the majority protecting the minority. And capitalism is the majority owning no, sorry, the minority owning the majority. And that is
mm,
that is something where we have to be really careful, what kind of capitalism we have here. And in the US they would probably say, oh, you're a liberal, you're a communist. Well, I am a socialist or a social democrat. um, yeah, my parents were real socialists, and going on marches and protesting against nuclear weapons. But what my takeaway from social democracy is the way that we value it in the Netherlands is that, yeah, the strong look out for the weak, and that is I think the core of the European value, is that everybody has a right to live in existence, and that is something that in tech we need to understand as well. Is that, if you really want to build tech for the greater good, it's not just to make the 1% richer, like what's happening in certain countries right now, or even the 1% becoming in control of the country and,
mm.
and basically just defuncting the government. No, we need to have a strong government, and because that's better for the greater good. I do wholeheartedly agree with you that bureaucracy is a problem in Europe. But the big problem there is that there's no united Europe and all the laws are different. And we should not, stomp down on innovation. We should make that possible. But we need to do that together with the governments or with Europe to actually look, okay, where can we just, go a little bit further than usual, see what happens, but then build something that is morally just for society and for humanity. And I think that's where we stand out is our ethics and our morals in Europe. And I think that that's something that we want to see reflected in the tech ecosystem as well. So I'm looking at you, everyone, in the startup and scale up ecosystem. What you're doing is far more important just, oh yeah, I'm building a nice company, maybe becoming wealthy and getting an exit for my investors. Now we're talking about the future of Europe here, and the way of living that we're so used
Very nicely said. Very nicely
to. Thank
said.
you.
Um, yeah, but I feel that it is very hard to undervalue the current shift that is going on and the role
Hmm.
that the tech scene plays in it and how Europe needs to approach it. It's beyond us in this conversation, of course. It's the forces that are now in play are so large and so vast and incalculable that it will take decades for us to really understand what is going on. But when we're coming down to a level a bit lower in the startup ecosystem in Europe, what would you say is the way forward? How do we support innovation in the level that we are capable of doing at the very least?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is that where we struggle in Europe is access to funding, and especially early stage. So from the top up, I think pension funds needs to get their act together and start investing in European tech and not on the US stock market or in banks that will then just, I mean, I heard that the Swedish pension funds were just over leveraged in Silicon Valley Bank. Yeah, that's not something you could do. And if you look on the long term, you can make bank on your pension funds or private equity or whatever if you invest in Europe just as good as you can in Europe. Sorry, as in the US. So put your money where your mouth is. And that also is for the early stage startups. And secondly, I think if you look at early stage startups, one thing that we're good at in Europe is making money. We're not addicted to capital. We always had the opportunity to build companies. And that's why we have, especially in countries like Germany, but also in the Netherlands, a lot of family owned businesses who are hundreds or even older than that, hundreds of years old. And so it's not always about, becoming this unicorn hockey stick growth. And even nowadays with AI, and we see that a lot happening, is that there are bootstrapped startups that are making bank already. I mean, with a couple of people on your team, you can already build something that is becoming profitable fast, and you only need, like, let's say, a small pre-seed round or not even a large seed round anymore to become a profitable and a fast-growing company, and then you can invest in your cash flow. By the way, right now we're doing a research, so reach out to us, editors at siliconcanals.com, where we're looking for bootstrapped AI companies, but not just or AI infused companies who are doing more than 1 million ARR. And they are there. There are more of them than you actually think. But for us as media, usually these are not the ones who are blogging or on podcasts or sending out press releases. And it's hard to cover them. Yeah, they send something and we think they're doing something interesting, but we don't know how fast they are actually growing. I mean, everybody's talking about Lovable, for instance, or companies similar like that who are, well, they did raise money, but they just seemingly came out of nowhere and building companies that maybe have already achieved unicorn status maybe by now or in a couple of years without raising 50 million Series A, 150 million Series B. In fact, I think a lot of those companies will not raise on follow-on rounds. I've talked to a lot of VCs, early stage VCs, who say if you're a late stage investor, and particularly one of our partners, Fortino Capital, says that if you're a late stage investor, really think thoroughly about what you're doing, because early stage is probably the only thing that is left. Companies can now grow independently, and thanks to AI, with just a fraction of the capital that they used to do in the old days. And I think we as Europeans have that opportunity because we do not build unicorns, we build zebras. We build tech SMEs that can grow and exist for decades without external capital, without the pressure to sell, without the pressure to go IPO. I mean, IPO, who wants to go IPO right now? I mean, even Klarna doesn't want to go IPO at the moment. Um, yeah, so I think that is the huge opportunity for early stage startups to grow independently and become a real business, like a profitable company, people. That's what business is about, building a profitable company, not about raising more money. Okay, there, I said it.
I do share the frustration. I do share it. Uh, you know, I come from a very traditional type of business where we're bootstrapped, where we rely on our own profits and our own income to grow. And only thing that we have is, our own capital and our own relationships with our clients, with our suppliers, with our employees, and so on and so forth. And when I talk to startups about it, especially startups that have passed that initial hump of like pre-seed seed stage, they look at me like I'm insane. We're like, oh, that's so boring. Like, what's your exit strategy? When are you going to go public? Like, why are you growing only double digits every year, not triple digits? What is wrong with you? And I'm like, well, I'm running a
Well, what is
business.
the answer? Yeah, what is the answer to
I'm
that? What
running
do
a
you
business
tell them?
that creates value for my clients, for myself, for my employees, and I hope for society at large. At least that's what I try to do. We aren't focused specifically on societal problems, but we try to be conscious of the contributions that we make to society as a whole.
Yeah,
So I try to keep that in balance, and that's the goal. That has always been the goal, and
yeah.
not growing 100,000x and exiting as a billionaire. Like, what's the point?
I mean, it is nice. It is nice. It must be a really nice life. But yeah, and to your point, I mean, we're the only media company, tech media publication in Europe who publishes in English that is, well, as far as I know, 100% owned by the owners and has no external investment. Maybe somebody will correct me wrong, but yeah, I think that that is really valuable, and it also means that we have that independence. We have, we can do what we want, within certain limits, of course, but that also brings that independence to that. And there's no external pressure to do something we don't want to do. So we are covering, AI tool of the week, early companies who are building, by the way, very interesting. Look at them. It's so amazing. But also, we did product spotlight in the past because we sometimes want to, show those amazing products that are built. Or we do new kid on the block. We really cover those early stage startups. I mean, and it doesn't always get, the most page views, yeah, if we would do, if you put unicorn in the title, it gets, 10,000 page views. But we want to cover the startups that nobody else has covered, or in industries that somebody else hasn't covered, because we think it's important that it's out there, and it may lead to something 10 years down the line. We were the first media publication, and maybe it only got 500 page views back then, but yet there was just one person who read it and brought that company further. And I think that's very something to be proud of as well, and something that we see is important, is just nurturing that European ecosystem from the ground up, and yeah, building something that they feel comfortable with sharing their information. When they get out there, it's very, like you said, it's very scary to go to the media already in early stage. And we try to be a little bit more of a friend, or at least a safe haven for them to talk to.
Eh, I hope that's comforting for some founders who are listening to us to hear. Because I do remember that feeling of being very small and media being out of reach, basically. And like you mentioned, the podcasts, I feel that that's a very nice outlet for showcasing who you are and what you are. And I'm not trying to become the top number one podcast in the world, but it does help showcase, how I look at things and how I approach business and what my philosophy to everything is and who are the people that I talk to generally, what kind of guests I invite and what kind of topics I highlight. And I believe that that's accessible to many nowadays. Like even 5, 10 years ago, it was very hard to do because just by virtue of the landscape changing constantly, like the standards of what is considered a high def camera was changing like every year 10 years ago, right? Nowadays, if you hit 1080p, you're good. If you hit 4K, you're great, but you're probably good within those two ranges, and nothing is going to be really changing soon. And most of phones now have 4K cameras built in them, and all people have phones, so the barrier of access have never been lower than right now. That, of course, leads to a bit of an oversaturation when it comes to content, and that's another topic. But if you are trying to build something long term, it's definitely a net positive, I believe, in the end.
Well, and you see for yourself. I mean, it is easy to do a podcast, but we were struggling with the tech even in the beginning a little bit. Well,
Yeah.
I had a good setup and checked everything, and I've done this so many times. But yeah, I mean, tech is getting better, but it's also harder, and there's more there's more content, but I think there needs to be more quality content. So if you are doing something as an early stage founder, or maybe even late stage founder, focus on quality content. And I think that that is something that you guys, I don't want to butter you up here a little bit. But what you do nicely is, yeah, you had just, amazing guests all over Europe, different topics, yeah, and it builds a tremendous amount of value. Yeah, it takes a lot of time, but it's also, very rewarding, and you learn a lot while you do that as well.
True.
And with me, it just, yeah, the way I started my career as a freelancer, I started blogging. That was the first thing I started doing. I was already a writer and I had a few clients, but yeah, just on the side, I started blogging. I was one of the first football blogger back in 2004, 2005 in the Netherlands. And I would never landed my first job as a sports journalist in 2006 if I hadn't had that blog. That was the reason why they wanted me. And it was just so funny, I got paid €200 a month for that as a student, and I wrote 2 blogs a day. That was hardly worth the effort. I mean, I probably get paid like, maybe maybe 5 cents per blog if you, and I wrote way more than two a day because I loved it. And I was just accessing some old information on my social media pages on the Wayback Machine, and I saw one of those stories, and they were really funny. It was just about a football player saying something on a comedy show about dressing room humor, and that was the kind of thing I was blogging about. But that landed me that job, and then later on when I started my own career, I started blogging about social media. That's how I started. About I founded, I don't know if you still know Foursquare, but it was one
Oh
of
yeah.
the first location-based social media companies. Everybody, I still do that. I still check in. I'm such a boomer here with technology. But yeah, I interviewed the founder in, I don't know, what was it, 2009, 2010? I interviewed one of the first founders of Hives. That was the social media network we used here in the Netherlands before Facebook. So yeah, and I built my expertise on top of that, and that's why I'm relevant as the founder of Silicon Canals, as the founder of Proudly Represents, doing tech, because yeah, I know what has been going on for all these years, and I know that, and I have that network because I interviewed a lot of people. So becoming sort of a publisher of your own, like you guys are doing, and building your own content marketing on top of that, it holds tremendous power, and that will lead into all certain ways. And yeah, sometimes in my case, it actually led to a business where I am actually doing that and monetizing that. But it can also be, becoming a publisher, becoming the media of your own, and doing your own marketing like that. Yeah, it's just tremendously powerful. So well done.
Thank you very
You're a
much.
great
Thank you
example.
for the
You're a
kind
great case
words.
study.
Everybody is free to study us at closer detail, and you know where to find us: Seegly.com or youtube.com/Innovantage Podcast. So, yeah.
Yeah, this was right the moment for the advert for that, right? Yeah. So follow, like, subscribe below. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, 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 yeah. Those call to actions, algorithms love them. You gotta put them in. So
Thumbs up.
you've talked a little bit about like tech innovation and in the landscape of Europe and how AI plays a huge role in it.
Mm,
And I think that's on everybody's mind for a couple of years now, AI, how it will impact the landscapes of many jobs and tech specifically. And so far, tech has been impacted by lots and lots of downsizes where everybody talks that you no longer will need engineers very soon and everything will be done by AI. And the hype is still going very strong. But what is your opinion? You have a very robust view of many startups and many ecosystems and many informational flows and a history of looking at different hype cycles in tech, generally speaking. So, how do you look
yeah.
at AI? What do you think about it?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going back to, social media. I was sort of like a social media expert, social media guru for a while. Was sort of playing that card, and everybody was like, yeah, all the hype that was around it. But in the end, it will all become part of our everyday lives. And I think with AI, it's becoming much faster. Like I said, the brainstorm that we just did this week, ChatGPT, Fireflies, all these tools were just, a natural part of that. Well, where 4 years ago, they were nowhere in sight. And what I think with AI specifically, people are always saying, oh, people will lose their jobs. Um, I don't think so. Well, developers, maybe just grunt developers. I think the biggest issue here is that you don't need junior developers anymore. You need senior developers only. But the biggest problem you will have is that in order to become a senior developer, you need to become a junior developer first. So the
Exactly.
ecosystem there has a huge problem that they need to solve and fix. And I'm looking at you as well. Do you agree with that statement or not? I mean, you have a shit ton of developers on the payroll, so
I see it as a big problem, definitely. So I can definitely understand the attraction of cutting costs and not raising juniors anymore. Because a lot of the work, low level work, where people actually learn to do stuff, can be easily, well, maybe not completely outsourced or automated, but cut down by like 90%.
yeah,
And but at the same time, I do see the problem. Okay, like where do you get the juniors then from to grow to middle guys and senior guys and architects and people that found their own companies? Like people need to
exactly.
learn somewhere. And I see a huge potential in the transformation of how people learn, generally speaking, in education.
Yeah,
So the old school education where you read a book and you do a test, in today's landscape, I feel that loses its efficacy and efficiency, where we need to
yeah,
find new approaches. And I do see tremendous potential in AI based learning, where
yeah,
where you have your own personal coach at all times who can guide you personally in a tempo that you are comfortable with, using the words that you understand and highlighting your own mistakes as you go. Like every
yeah,
person in the world having their own personal tutor in the discipline that they're studying. So I
yeah.
feel like if the educational circles are changed a little bit, where the type of junior that is being produced is no longer a person who can Google pretty well and knows the syntax of one language or two, but rather
Hmm.
a person who has the critical thinking skills of tackling challenges very quickly and learning very quickly. Now, those
Yeah,
types of people can make that jump between, junior to middle very fast. And that, in turn, of course, lowers the burden on businesses like ours to support that. Like
mm,
maybe we cannot invest 2, 3 years for a person to become from junior to middle, but one
yeah,
year, 6 months, why not? That's still something that you're investing in and something that you need.
yeah.
So I believe that there is definitely a future for juniors, but there is definitely, well, challenge to transition to what a junior even is in this new landscape. If that makes
Yeah, you have
sense.
to become way more analytical. You have to be really more, yeah. You're not writing the code from scratch anymore, probably. But yeah, if you go into more complex things, yeah, we still need people who will be able to write code. So I don't see a clear solution to that, or only old people are able to do that. It's like the train tracks here in the Netherlands that still run on an outdated version of Windows, and there's only a couple of people who can still do that, and there's only, you know, there's only still a couple of machines out there that can, be hooked into that. But just on a broader level, if you look at AI, AI will not steal jobs. AI will make our jobs better because most of the tasks that we do in especially in, let's say, middle level jobs are tedious and repetitive, and those kind of tasks we can easily have done by AI, and that leaves room for something that I mean, they can do it a little bit, but AI still cannot be fully autonomously creative like a human. And so I'm an optimist, and I see AI as a huge possibility to unleash and unlock our creativity because we spend less time doing tedious and boring tasks. And hopefully, in the future, it will also reduce our workload because we are still doing something very stupid. We have a 9 to 5, 40-hour work week, or if you're French, maybe 32. Um, but yeah, and half the time you're protesting anyway. Sorry, that was a side to the French. We like to actually strike as well here in the Netherlands, not as much as the French, but um, and we're also huge part-time workers here in the Netherlands too. But I think there's a case to be made to actually do that. And with AI, why should everybody work still 9 to 5? We're not working in a factory. This is something that was designed for a factory. Even our school systems are, aligned with how factories are designed in the industrial revolution. Why? We needed workers. We needed people on the production line creating the T-Ford or other machines. That was the way that we grew. But nowadays we're in a knowledge economy. Why are we actually working 9 to 5? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can. Yeah, just look at my partner. She does her best work on a Saturday night, 11 o'clock in the evening. And yeah, she likes to go out on a Wednesday afternoon and go to the park and get some sunshine. And why not? And why are companies still acting like that? And I think, you had the 4 hour work week, which was a great book, but I think 4 hours maybe is not enough. But if you have a 12-hour work week, I think that should be sufficient to be productive and creative. That's about the time that you can do it. And maybe then you have 8 hours more, for the social interaction in the company, because a company is also a culture. It is something of our own. I don't believe as companies as a family, but you definitely need some sort of culture and people gelling together to unleash that creativity, because you need that trust. But I think that is the company of the future, is an AI infused, an AI powered company where all employees can, on their level of thinking, can unleash their creativity, or can do their work, or assist the AI in doing those tasks. And, and yeah, I think that is a really bright future, And we just have robots doing the dishes and the groceries and restocking our things. We just have to live in this la la land, and maybe in the Netherlands smoke a joint while we're sitting on the canal side, and have the robots do our work. Now, I'm kidding and over exaggerating, of course, but I think that's something where we can look forward to in the future.
That's a beautiful vision of the future. One that I definitely would love to come to fruition versus whatever it is the hell that America is trying to achieve. I don't think that they even know. Definitely no canals and joints in their future, at least how they're trying to build it.
Well, and what is so dangerous is the abolition of science and facts, and the fact that, so what they're trying to do is they're trying to establish a tyranny. And when you try to establish something, that first thing what you do is take out the cultural and scientific elite. That is the playbook that everybody has done everywhere. And anti-elitism, and then I'm talking about cultural and intellectual elites, is something that is really scary. And it sounds like, yeah, all these smart people are controlling us. No, they're not controlling you. They know what's best for you because they are smart. And you have to listen to them because they know facts. They actually know that, the polar caps are melting. They know that we're actually running out of fossil fuel if we continue. We know that there's actually climate change happening. You have to listen to these people because they have the best thing in mind for you. And yeah, and that is, I think, where we can, definitely, some of the oldest universities in the world are from Europe, and that is because we have always, valued our independent thinking, and that is something that is critical and so important for us as a democracy, and as for tech as well, is that we value, what is reality, what is science, and what are facts.
Yeah, very well put. Very well put. And the counter argument to that, though, is you can listen to idiots because they speak very loud. So, sorry.
Yeah, no, and unfortunately, we nowadays, and maybe social media is to blame. I was once on a stage at a big social media conference, and I said that Twitter is the savior of democracy because everybody has a free and independent voice that they can heard. Boy, was I wrong, and it's now in the hands of one of the biggest, yeah, and most dangerous people on earth, I would say. So yeah, maybe I'm going to be wrong, but that's why we need to take that power back as Europe, and take the power back of these technology platforms, taking our voice back, and also on facts. And I hope that AI can actually help with that, because AI done right is objective, is non-biased, and can bring us truth and facts, instead of listening to algorithms on social media that feed us, into our bubble, and feed us lies. And that is something, hopefully we will see the emergence of of a European social media platform where we actually have, where the truth is actually spoken or things are actually fact checked, and where people are safe to express their opinions. So yeah, that is definitely something I haven't seen yet, but hopefully it will come pretty soon.
Yeah, time will tell. Time will tell. So, in that vein, then, what do you feel is the next big thing for startups innovation? Is it AI still, or is it something else?
I think one point where we can excel in Europe is deep tech, because all these things need to be powered by, you know, not just the infrastructure around it. I mean, yeah, we have to solve all these big climate problems. And yeah, right now AI is actually maybe speeding up climate change even more, with the sheer power consumption that it's doing, and it will only exponentially grow. So we need quantum computers, we need photonics, we need data centers that are hyper efficient and use less energy. But we also need, how can we cool this? How can we store this? And that's just one thing. And in deep tech, I'm not just talking about deep tech, but also how are we going to, feed people? How are we going to use land? Do we want to have less nitrogen? So climate tech together with deep tech, we really need to focus on that in Europe as well. How are we going to produce all these chips with all these microchips or photonic chips in the future for the quantum computers, supercomputers we need. Well, yeah, I mean, the labor costs are so high here for people. How can we do that efficiently? So there's all kinds of things at play here for to actually make that happen, to make really that AI revolution that we're already in. How to do that sustainable and how to really win technology back to Europe. We need deep tech for that. And fortunately, the EU, the European Commission, really sees that. All the countries are seeing that. But yeah, I think we also need that for defense tech, for instance. To getting our. Unfortunately, I'm a pacifist, but yeah, I've never been so much on the side of we need to re-weaponize ourselves. I think it was yesterday that the Dutch king urged again, yeah, we need to take the power back. We need to start, weaponizing ourselves in order to protect ourselves. And um, but we have to do that in a smart way as well, not just having weapons for the greater good, but also creating weapons that then later. I mean, Silicon Valley was built on top of the defense industry. Something that for the future will also lead to innovations that we can use for the greater good. And I think there in Europe we can really lead the way because we are visionaries. We're science based. We are looking at facts and we are looking at what is the greater good. So yeah, um, deep tech I think is the way to go.
Then let's look out for the next wave in deep tech. I, well, I do believe that this is one of those areas that can be very, very transformative for the Europe of tomorrow. And we'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, and
So,
just
Remco,
just one
where
more
do.
point.
Yeah, feel free.
So if I can get back to that, we just talked about the pension funds, and we talked about, especially a lot of companies will rely less on venture capital, but with deep tech and hardware or those kind of things, we would still need that capital. And I think it's very important for pension funds, family offices, private investors to invest in those deep tech companies earlier on. And right now it's really difficult because, yeah, with the current market conditions, deep tech is the hardest thing to do.
All right.
And it has a very long runway, and maybe now even longer than ever. It's maybe 10, 12 years. But, the money that these family offices and pension funds have, under their allocation, they need to use that for the greater good because it's not just it is about our livelihood as a society, as a European society. So they have, I feel, the moral obligation to fund those early stage deep tech funds in Europe. That's where they need to put their money, and not just and it will bring a return in the long run, not just monetarily, but also morally and in terms of the innovations that they have. So they have to look across just a paycheck for next year. They need to look at, okay, what are we building? What do we want to build in 10, 20 years? What do we want to have in terms of innovation? What do we actually want to fund? Because we think it's good for the greater good. Of course, pension funds also need to make money because yeah, otherwise we won't have any pensions and Europe is bankrupt. But I think those two can go hand in hand.
Yeah, and I believe that there has been talk about scaling down some of the social programs and reinvesting into different, different areas as what we are traditionally used to. And I feel
Mm.
that investments into a more aggressive technical innovation is a nice balance between, let's cut back all of the pensions and invest everything into weapons just for the sake of, feeling safer versus, let's do nothing and ignore everything and pretend that everything is fine. So a more aggressive strategy in terms of an investment and a technical proficiency and innovation is in place. It should be in place at least. Time is right for
Mhm.
that. But again, you know, time will tell what kind of course we will decide on.
Well, I mean, time will tell, but there's no time to be wasted. This needs to be happening now. So, yeah, pension funds, family offices, VCs, PEs, get your act together and invest in early stage European funds and European companies, and especially in deep tech. That's my message here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm cracking the whip here.
So you heard it here, folks. Invest into deep tech. And if you are in deep tech, you know how to approach your media strategy, at least a little
We
bit
love
now.
covering deep tech. We love covering deep tech. So yeah, I think we're one of the media publications that, yeah, if we can choose between a consumer-based company and a deep tech company, even though the consumer one gets more page views, we will cover the deep tech company for sure.
That's very cool. Very cool. So thank you, Remco. Where do people find you? I kind of have a an idea of how you're going to answer, but yeah, I think I've seen this somewhere somehow. But where do people find you? Where do people read more of you?
So first of all, SiliconCanals.com, where my excellent team of journalists cover the European tech. Secondly, I would say LinkedIn, where I'm trying to, sort of get my voice out more. And thank you for having me here on the podcast because it really helped me also structure my thinking. And I said everything I wanted to say, but yeah, sometimes it's hard if you haven't said that all out loud altogether. So definitely, this podcast has been a great help. But yeah, LinkedIn is our best place to be. Follow Silicon Canals there as well. Follow me on LinkedIn. And yeah, we have a great newsletter that comes out every Monday. And yeah, we're looking to build on top of that, maybe even make it daily or topic based throughout the week. Have several different ones. So yeah, that's definitely. But SiliconCanals.com is the best place to learn everything about European tech.
Thank you, Remco. Thank you very much. And
Thank you as
thank
well.
you all for listening to us, for tuning in to our discussion today. If you liked what you heard, tell us about it in the comments. If you didn't like it, you can also tell it about it in the comments. You can argue between yourselves with the first guys that liked it. Algorithms, they love that stuff. But try and be nice. Try and be nice. Try and support each other. We are all in this together and we're trying to make the world a better place. At least that's what I hope for. Subscribe to us, like, share the video, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.